All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Borowski, and I'll be your host for today. May is quickly disappearing. I know a lot of our classrooms in the US have wrapped up for the year. Some will go into June, and then our Canadian crew will be with us until the end of the month. So until that time comes, we have a jam-packed bit of action for you, particularly coming up next week when we celebrate World Ocean Week. So if you visit the site, exploringbytheseat.com/Ocean Week, you can find a series of incredible events in partnership with the Explorers Club. You won't want to miss them, from virtual field trips to hanging out with documentary filmmakers and ocean explorers and scientists. It's going to be a great time. All right. Well, today's event is a special one. As always, we're connecting with the crew from Hearts in the Ice, the team of Hilda Strom and Sunniva Sorby, two seasoned polar ambassadors and citizen scientists. Hearts in the Ice was created in 2018 as a global platform for education and social engagement, connecting students, scientists, manufacturers, environmental organizations, and all who care about the health of our planet in the conversation around climate change and ways we can all be a part of the solution. So Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants classrooms have been following along since September 2019. Sunniva and Hilda spent a total of 19 months living in a remote trapper's cabin called Bumsaboo in Svalbard, isolated and 140 kilometers from their closest neighbor. Since the return from the Arctic last May, they've been continuing with monthly school calls and have been keynote speakers at COP26 and other key events. Climate change isn't taking a break, and neither are they. So we're thrilled to have them both with us today. And you never know where they're going to be. So I'm going to bring in Sunniva, who is with us on Vancouver Island. Hey,
Hi, Joe.
How are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you. And then we've got Hilda, who's in Cyprus today. So always spread out, always somewhere, but great to have the two of you with us.
Great to be with you. And I can't believe that you are hosting all of the World Oceans events at the Explorers Club next week. Pace yourself.
Yeah, it should be a good time. It should be a lot of fun. So we hope to see all of our classrooms hanging out with us.
Excellent. You know, you and Hilda and Sefra, our special guest today, and myself have something in common, and we're all members of the Explorers Club. And we were at the same dinner and didn't even know Sefra was there. How's that?
That's a lot of people from all over the world. So I'm not surprised, but I'm a little bummed out that now we're meeting virtually and not face to face.
Yeah. Absolutely. Hilda, do you want to kick us off with a little update on your part, since people haven't seen your lovely face in a while?
Yeah, hi everyone. Last time we had a call, I was on Iridium phone that Sunniva and I used to be way back when we were staying at Bumsaboo. So last week I called in from an Iridium phone from the high Arctic of Svalbard, from a ship. But today I am on the other side, almost on the planet, at least a little further south, having some warmth. And enjoying the biodiversity in this side of the world. So happy to be on board and to see all of your kids out there. And I am so much looking forward to listen to Sefra's presentation about seeds.
That's awesome. I think we're so happy to have her with us. And WINGS is a nonprofit that is based in New York, and they support women in science and exploration. And our Hearts in the Ice has been really fortunate to have some financial support from WINGS during our 19 months at Bumsaboo, including they have something called an emergency fund. So when we went back the second year, they supported us a little bit through that fund. So we're super grateful. And Sefra is also a WINGS carrier. So we share that in common. And I think it would be really cool, Joe, if you could just tee up that short little virtual video of the seed vault, and then we can just kick it off and let Sefra take over. But really happy to be with everybody today.
Absolutely. Let's do it. Actually, I'm just going to pop this link down so it doesn't block our video. There we go. All right. Well, I think it's time that we bring our speaker in for a little bit of time. As mentioned, we have Sefra Alexandra joining us, the seed huntress, an ethnobotanist on a perennial expedition to preserve and restore the flora of wild lands through conservation of seed. She's currently leading the Ecotype Project to amplify the amount of truly local native seed available for ecological restoration by creating the first ecoregional supply chain in the Northeast United States. In 2020, she began botanical.org, where she guides expeditions that are paddling for pollinators, planting native plants by boat along riparian corridors. Sefra is a WINGS WorldQuest expedition flag carrier, a member of the Explorers Club, and runs a wilderness school called the Readiness Collective. So let's bring her in live with us right now. Hey, Sefra, how you doing?
Hello, great to be here. And hello to everyone in all the classrooms all over. I'm really excited to show you the great, exciting world of seeds.
Excellent. Well, I got a little sneak peek of your presentation. There's some really cool images and really some interesting ways of seed dispersal that I think our students might not have even thought of before. So I think we should let you take over for a little bit and get right in.
Sounds great. Well, thanks for sharing that video, because we will talk about how those seeds get to those seed vaults. But first, as we start back on slide number 1, that's the last slide.
Oh, I can bring it in and out, but you've got to pop it back to the beginning for us.
Okay, everyone close their eyes. So
I took it out. It's fine. No one's going to see anything. They just see us right now. But okay. I will share the link to botanical.org, because that sounds super cool. And definitely a site worth checking out for our students who are joining us. So we'll pop that up on the screen so students can check it out. I see the slides flying back to the beginning.
Dun, 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 dun. All right, we are now at slide number 1. Here
Perfect.
We go.
We're in business.
Perfect. Okay, well, everyone, welcome. I'm so excited to see where you all are located when we do the questions at the end of this. But I would like to welcome you all to the wild world of seed conservation. So we're going to go on a seed conservation safari to see how seeds are dispersed. And what dispersed means is how they're spread out onto the wild landscape. How do they get there? How do trees, seeds get away from the big mother plants? How does this all happen? So what I want to show you is, as the seed huntress, I have gotten to travel all around the world. And what I'm hunting for are seeds. And seeds are everywhere. When you eat your apples, you can see the seeds inside them, or your grapes or the strawberries, those little dots on the outside. Seeds are all around us. And once you start opening up your eyes and looking at them, you realize that they're everywhere. So I have gone all around the world to help protect them and make sure that where they exist, they can always exist. So our forests can, keep on being these beautiful, diverse landscapes, and our meadows and all of the different habitats of the earth. So let's look at these seeds. And aren't they amazing? If we think about that, all of those trees and all of the plants and all of the flowers that we see everywhere can be basically distilled, made to be these little beautiful, they look like gems or beads you could put on a necklace. They're just so beautiful and ornate and gorgeous. And this is how nature packages all of its beautiful diversity. And you can just see that these are living embryos, right? Seeds are sleeping little babies, and they're just waiting for their right time to wake up, when they get put in the right soil, in the right climate, and they have water and sun. And when we think about it, seeds are amazing because they've been passed down from our ancestors, from human to human, since time immemorial, which means forever. And it's the same thing with the birds and the animals. They're helping to pass along the seeds too. But we'll start to look at some of the different ways that they do that. And I just think it's so cool to take a second. I mean, this looks like it could be from Dr. Seuss, like a truffula tree, right? How long can seeds sleep for? How long do they need before they can wake up? Well, these scientists found these seeds that were cataloged. They had done an archaeological dig a very long time ago, and they found these seeds and they said, I wonder if these seeds will still grow. And what happened was This is a Judean date palm. After 2,000 years of that seed being asleep, guess what? That seed woke up. So when I hold seeds in my hand, I have deep respect because they're living little creatures that can grow into these magnificent plants and trees. And look, they made dates 2,000 years later. Can you imagine? So who knows this character, right? From Ice Age, Scrat. And what does he have? He has an acorn. And who knows what type of tree an acorn grows? Hopefully you're all answering, but it's an oak, right? So the dispersal of seeds by animals, right? When animals take them and they fill their mouths with them, or sometimes when you have those sticky types of seeds that get caught to their fur and they bring them throughout the landscape, that's called zoochory, or the dispersal of seed by animals. And what that happens, that little acorn can grow into this mighty oak. And this oak here is a 400-year-old oak called the angel oak. So just imagine, from that one little seed, it can last for so long. Who knows what flower this is? Have any of you ever blown the seeds off of this? Right? It's a dandelion. And so how do these seeds disperse? Well, they disperse on the wind. They have these little parachutes, those fluffy little parts called a pappus. And when you blow on them, or the wind blows on them, that's anemochory. So that's seed dispersal by wind. And this, of course, the Taraxacum officinale, the dandelion, a wonderful plant, has a lot of great edible qualities, but that's another story. Never eat plants without knowing what you're doing. But when we look at different seeds and how they move throughout the landscape, there's a lot of great books for you teachers out there. A Seed is Sleepy, and we're going to look at some images from Seeds Move by Robin Page. Okay, so look at this. Who knows that's a really big seed, right? You can cut it open. It's got that white meat inside. So for all of you, who can guess what it is? Coconut. Okay, so, and who knows what type of tree coconut grows? Can we see those palm trees in the background, right? So coconuts, the way that those seeds are dispersed is hydrochory, right? The coconuts fall into the water whisks them away. That's seed dispersal by water. Other ways, they can just fall into water, right? And they float along until they find soil along the seed bank, and then they're able to grow that way, like this monkey ladder seed. Also, you can see those lotus flowers. They just drop right into the water and fall all the way down into the soil. Or this dung beetle that pushes around droppings from animals, they bury it down below the soil, and that's how those seeds get planted. Or birds, right? Birds are eating our berries. They're eating all sorts of acorns, and they bury them and they hide them, or they go to the bathroom in different areas. And then that's how those seeds grow up and are spread. So ornithochory, the dispersal of seed by birds. Even ants help out in this endeavor, right? They take the seeds and they burrow them underground. This is the seed of Sanguinaria canadensis, the bloodroot, right? And so that's murmurichory, the dispersal of seed by ants. And there's even really cool plants like some jewel weeds and stuff. When you touch them, the seeds explode. Ballochory, seed dispersal. So all of these different dispersal mechanisms are how the seed can get away from their parent plant so they can have the room and the sun and the soil to be able to grow up into these beautiful plants that then produce their own set of seeds. So as all of nature is helping us spread out these seeds, what happens? We get all of this amazing diversity. Can anyone guess what type of fruit this is? It is a banana. Who knew that there were pink bananas, right? Oftentimes in our modern agriculture, we are only eating one species. So we're probably just used to that one big yellow banana. But throughout the world and in all of these wild lands, because of the way that nature has been able to spread its seed, we have pink and purple and all of these different varieties of bananas, and they are absolutely delicious. So when we talk about where all this diversity comes from, right, that's what's called centers of origin. So where these wild plants first emerge on the landscape. So where the pink bananas grow up in Eastern Asia, or as potatoes in Peru. I'll show you a picture. All of these different potatoes, they're in the Andes in South America. What happens is that is called their centers of origin. And those are the crop wild relatives. So those are the wild plant species that through agriculture, right? We said, we like the way that wild plant tastes, so we're going to plant it again and again. And that's when we go from being foragers, right? When we have to go out into the wildlands and the mountains to collect our food, to be able to grow them in an agricultural setting, in a farming setting. So after we do that for thousands of years, we get the different varieties that we like and taste good and do well where we're living. That's when we start to see all this beautiful diversity from our farmers, right? Look at all of those different colors of carrots, purples and reds and oranges and yellows, and the peppers, all the colors of the rainbow. And same with tomatoes. There's just so many different varieties that have adapted to different places in the earth and different soils. And all of that diversity is so important because it allows us to have food and nutrients in all the different places that we live. Who's ever eaten beans before, right? There are 40,000 different varieties of beans. They're just every shape and size and color. And it's just such a beautiful painter's palette. You can paint with these or make beautiful art, right? And they all taste different and delicious. So as you saw Svalbard, the global seed vault. We have all of this diversity all over the earth, but with different, with all of the different anthropogenic or different man-made developments that are happening on our land when we are, wiping out some of our wild lands to build houses or cities, or we have hurricanes or tornadoes or fires that come through, a lot of this diversity can be lost. And so what we need to do is we need to collect those seeds and we put them in these little jars and make sure that they're very dry and they're kept cold and at a steady temperature. And we preserve them in these global seed vaults. And the fancy word for when you take a seed out of the soil, you put it in a jar and put it in a cold area, that's called ex situ. So ex situ means we're preserving this diversity. So in case something happens on the landscape or these seeds no longer exist where they're from, we can take the seeds out of these vaults and we can replant our fields to make sure we don't lose all of these beautiful varieties. And so the world has 13 very big seed banks, and these are where they're placed. So the seed banks, as I said before, are based on centers of origin, where the crops first emerge. So you have maize or corn and wheat in southern Mexico. So you can see that's where that seed bank exists. You have the diversity of potatoes that are safeguarded in Peru. You have rice in the Philippines. And where I did my field work with a crop called taro, which I'll show you in Fiji in the South Pacific. So if we look, what you can see, that picture in the black is what's called teosinte. So that's the crop wild relative of maize or modern corn. And what it started out as was just this like tiny little pebble that if you tried to chew it, you would crack your tooth, right? It was this little grain. But for thousands of years, these different hunter-gatherers, now farmers, would replant that grain. And year after year, they would save the seeds from those grain heads that got biggest and then tasted best. So after selection, they were able to save the seeds from what then had become a big corn head, right? And from that, now after they've planted those seeds all over the world, we get this global diversity, like this beautiful glass gem corn that looks like jewels. And so now we find maize and corn in every color you can imagine. And so at CIMMYT, which is the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center, that's the seed bank that safeguards all of our corn diversity. They have 177,000 different varieties that they're safeguarding. And that means that we can have all of the different varieties that do well in all of the places where we live. And 158,000 of them are stored up in that seed vault that we saw up in Norway. So why are we making sure that we preserve all this beautiful diversity? Well, did you all know that there are 30,000 different types of plants that you can actually eat, and that a lot of different countries all over the world eat? Vegetables and fruits that you've never even heard of, or ones that taste like chocolate, or ones that taste like bubblegum, or you can't imagine how many delicious, delicious fruits and vegetables there are all around the world. But in our modern diet, right, what we usually see on our dinner and our lunch plates, we are only eating about 150 of these species. And so we're only really relying on 1% of all of the food crops that are actually available to us. And because we're not really eating a lot of those other ones, they're being lost because the farmers aren't growing them, because there isn't a market for people to buy them and to eat them. So my work as a seed huntress has been helping people to know how delicious all of the diversity that we can eat is, and how important it is that we as seed savers make sure that we protect the seeds of all of this beautiful diversity all over the world, right? And what we're predominantly eating, as you saw, for most of our calories are wheat and rice and corn and potatoes. But the work that I did, this is me on expedition doing field work in the Cook Islands, actually. I was telling the tale of a crop called taro. Now, taro kind of looks like a potato, right? It's called an aroid, and it has those big elephant ear leaves. And if any of you have ever seen Moana, right? It was in the South Pacific. There's very traditional cultures that still, I was there when they were coronating this gentleman you see up in the top as a new king. And they rode in on one of those Moana-like boats. And the whole island brought these root crops, these taro, to them to celebrate. Now, there is the Irish potato famine, which maybe some of you have heard about, which is where just one variety of potato was planted in Ireland, but a blight came in, right? A bug and a mildew came in, and it was that one variety happened to be susceptible to that. And so what happened is, once that mildew came, all of those potatoes rotted and the people had no food. Well, in the island of Samoa, the same thing happened with their taro. A phytophthora, or a blight, came in, and all of their taro was wiped out. So they had to rely on seed hunters like me and seed huntresses who went out back to those centers of origin and got those crop wild relatives to breed new taro that was able to survive that mildew, those bugs. And so when we think about it, those seed banks and preserving this biodiversity is so important for making sure that we can ensure that we all have the food that we need going forward, no matter what happens with changing climates, and making sure we have that diversity. Just like when you paint a picture, right? Artists need all the different colors of paint. Well, agriculturalists or farmers need all of the different diversity of seeds to be able to make sure we can adapt to whatever's happening in our changing climates. And that's all where you come in, right? We're the people of a pinch in time in our biodiversity, when we can either watch all of this beautiful diversity erode away, or we can help stand in and safeguard these seeds and help protect this delicious diversity for all of those that, all of the people and animals and insects that come after us. So in a way to make this fun, as a member of the Explorers Club and honored to carry the WINGS WorldQuest flag, which supports women in science, I started botanical expeditions, where I say, I'm not a botanist, I'm a botanist, and I take these native plants and all of these beautiful perennial plants with me on boat trips down different rivers. And what I do is I put them back in the living seed bank, right? Just like we have those seed banks in faraway places to safeguard our seeds, the best place that our seeds can be safeguarded is in our soils, our living seed banks. Because what happens then? Then we remember once those seeds grow up, right, they make their fruit, and then the fruits all have seeds, or they get those puffy types of seeds that can blow in the wind. Animalcory, wind dispersal. They can fall in the river. Hydrocory, dispersal by water. The squirrels will take them. Zoocory, right, dispersal by animals. The birds will eat them. Ornithocory, right? So the ants will carry them along. Myrmecory. And nature knows what to do. So once those seeds are back on the landscape, they can disperse it everywhere. But I want you all to remember that we all have a role to play, right? Anthropocory, the dispersal of seed by humans. So to go on expeditions, you don't have to fly on planes and go to some exotic place. We can do it right in our own backyards, because our pollinator friends need us to help put these plants back in. Our farmers need us to have these native plants there, because if the pollinators don't have the flowers and food they need, then we won't have the diversity of food we need, right? So I encourage you all to start looking around wherever you are, and you will see seeds everywhere, and realize that you can help plant those and help be a great seed hunter or huntress. And we can all work together to preserve the beautiful biodiversity we have on our landscapes, and honor the plants that have been here forever. So with that, I'm really excited to hear what some of your questions may be, and thank you so much.
All right. Sefra, thank you so much. That was a great presentation. And I think it really highlights how we forget sometimes about the flora. We're always thinking about the fauna. We see them around us, moving around us. We think they're cute, some of them, or scary other ones, but we forget about plants, I think, sometimes, and the important role they play, and that we can lose plants just like we can lose species.
Absolutely. It's so important. And there's, the more diversity of plants that we see, the more diversity of animals and insects, right? We have to think about, there's all the different foods that we like to eat, but it's the same thing with the insects and with the animals. If they don't have the food that they need, right, then they can't exist there. So we have to make sure that we make sure those plants are there so that we can protect them.
Absolutely. Healthy ecosystems with lots of biodiversity are resilient ecosystems. They bounce back from changes much, much better. Okay, well, those who are tuning in with us, use that chat sidebar, say a quick hello to us. I can see one class here, Mr. Hergott's crew is joining us, and they were wondering about that first picture you shared. Or one of the pictures you shared looked like an oak tree, and they're wondering if that was an old oak tree in Florida, that they said they visited a 400-year oak tree in Florida.
There are very old oak trees all over. Even where I'm in Connecticut, there's a 300-year-old oak tree. The one that I showed you is actually in Mississippi. But there are many different types of oak. There's black oak and red oak and scrub oak and white oak. So if there's a really old oak near where you all are, I'd love to know what species it is. But they all come from those little acorns. Quercus is the family of oaks, and quercophiles is the name for all the different animals that rely on those acorns to live, like deer and all sorts of things. So I'd love, send me a picture of that old oak tree if you all happen to be by it.
All right. And so Cinema's back in with us. Hilda disappeared backstage, so maybe her connection wasn't holding out for us. So maybe we'll see her join us shortly.
It's I hope so. I'm sure everybody's read the book Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. What an amazing book. And it made me think about, as you were speaking, Sefra, and your presentation was absolutely amazing. Thank you. That was really, really educational and inspirational. It made me think about how in some places people like to have the same types of trees or the same types of plants, and how important it is to really have diversity in our gardens and in our parks, right? And how important it is not to be homogenous with what we plant out there, because all of the different insects and birds and things need that diversity, even though aesthetically, we might like the same.
It's absolutely true. And that can be explained on so many different levels from an agricultural perspective, right? When we have what's called a monoculture, Just like I briefly told you with the Irish potato famine, or in Samoa with taro, or with an onion that I revived in Connecticut that then faced a blight and was wiped out. When we only rely on one genetic strain, one species, we are not resilient. We are susceptible to any number of things that might shift with climate and pests. And if we want to ensure that we safeguard our wild landscapes or our food systems, we need to have that different diversity. All of those potatoes that I showed you in Peru, for their seed bank, those seeds have to be maintained as not the dried out little seeds we think of as tomatoes or peppers. That's orthodox seed. But potatoes are recalcitrants. You actually have to plant the actual potato to maintain those genetic lines. And if you've ever seen an amphitheater, what they do is they plant each variety at a whole bunch of different altitudes. And the reason why they do that is because if one variety fails, or if there's a climatic problem at one altitude, they still have all of the other varieties, which gives you food security and resilience. And from a landscape perspective, right, we like to promote native trees like oak trees. What you want to see in your oak trees is you want to see those holes in the leaves, because that means caterpillars are eating them. And as Doug Tallamy's great book, Oak, says, there's over 300 different species of caterpillars on oaks, which feed our birds, which feed our whole ecological
300
web.
different species.
And when we have our non-native trees, the caterpillars around here, like in Connecticut, they say, we don't know what that is. We don't recognize it as food. So there's no food for your other birds. So we need to make sure that we have all of the diversity in our landscapes. We want to make our landscapes mimic what natural ecosystems and forests look like, which isn't just one level. We have the shrubs, and you have the canopy trees, and you have your vines and your ground covers. So when we're doing true what's called ecological restoration, you want to be mimicking natural ecosystems and make our man-made plantings look as much like that as possible, because that is what's really going to create and support the diversity of habitats that we need to support all of the diversity of animals and insects and so forth.
Wow.
All right. Well, let's bring in some questions now for some more questions. We've got lots coming in via YouTube. Don't be shy to send the questions in there, and we'll work some of those in. I want to give a special shout out to, where did they go? There we go. Miss Stam's grade 4-5s in Calgary, Alberta. They couldn't get into their camera spot, so they're tuning in via YouTube right now. But I want to bring in Miss Robinson's grade 7s. They're in Petawawa, Ontario. I just like saying that, Petawawa.
Yeah.
Hello. And Ontario is great because you have the Bauda Family Seed Initiative, which is the seed initiative in Canada that's safeguarding all of your seeds up there. So look into that.
Bauda?
Bauda, B-A-U-T-A, the Bauda Family Seed Initiative. Yes.
Very cool.
Hi, everyone. How are you?
Good. How many species of seeds are in the vault in Norway right now?
Great question. Well, thanks to Hilda, who actually just gave me that statistic. There's 1.2 million seeds, right? Which is over 6,000 different species of our cultivated field crops. And so once or twice a year, they actually open up the vault to put in new accessions from other countries. And I actually got to help them work on a new grant this past year to help reach out to countries who don't have their seeds yet in the seed vault, because there's this new project called the Bold Project from the Crop Trust, who I was a fellow for when I did my field work. And so the country of Georgia, right, they have all of these ancient grains and wheats like emmers and einkorns and all of these delicious wheats that make breads, but their seeds are not backed up in the seed vault yet. So now there's a whole project to get all of the countries who aren't represented there to get more seeds. So the Crop Trust has really great Vimeos that help to explain all of the great work that they do. So for your classroom, I would definitely check that out. But keep track, because the number of seed accessions, right, that's the fancy word for the seeds that are safeguarded, keeps on going up. And the more we have safeguarded there, the better. And just one other note, those are our agricultural crops. But for all of our wild species that we don't eat, some people use in herbalism and medicine and different things. But those are all safeguarded at the Millennium Seed Bank at the Royal Botanical Gardens at Kew. So that's another great seed bank to know about for the wild plants.
All right. Great question.
Yeah, and I should share with you guys that although I've been up to Svalbard many times, and of course he lives up there, you can't get in there. It's a locked vault. It's very, very private, although the building itself on the outside is just absolutely beautiful, nestled right inside the mountainside.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And it's really important that there's a lot of protection around it, right? Because that's preserving our world's diversity. So the Norwegian government has done a great job taking that role and responsibility very seriously.
All right. So I've got some great questions here coming in via the chat. We'll start off with this one. Where's this class from? I want to make sure I get it right. Miss Moore's class is joining us from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and they would like to know what drove your passion to seeds. You know, obviously you're very passionate about the work that you're doing. What sparked that?
That's a great question. My twin brother and I, we grew up going to survival schools, right? So those are the schools that teach you how to eat off the land, how to make shelters out of cattails, how to flint knap arrows and track animals. And I've always just loved the naturalist world. And as I became an educator and studied things called permaculture, I really wanted to become a specialist in some sector of the great world of sciences so I could help to educate and really dig deep into the sciences of the work. And I met these great mentors that were helping save the seeds of a lot of the Southwest indigenous tribes, the Hopi and the Navajo and the Tarahumara. Hopi blue corn is a corn that can grow in basically soils that look like they've been through a drought, because for thousands of years, the Hopi have safeguarded that corn that is adapted to grow in those conditions. So I walked into their seed bank and I saw all of these beautiful seeds by color in these jars. And at that point, knowing that each of these seeds holds a story, they hold a memory of a people and a place and a taste, I was just in awe of them. And I said, I want to dedicate myself to making sure I can help preserve all of this diversity for all the future generations to be able to enjoy these beautiful tastes that are so adapted to all these different places that we all come from. So that was the beginning of my seed journey.
All right. Very cool.
Great.
Well, we have a few classrooms here who are curious about, I was going to say following your footsteps, but it's more like your oar strokes on the river.
Yeah.
They would like to know, so two classrooms here. Mr. Hergott's crew are curious about where you should research, you know, maybe particularly somewhere like Ontario, but, you know, just in general, where should you research if you want to find kind of the right seeds to maybe plant while you're paddling down a river? And then Miss Brohart's crew are curious about, is there any seeds that should not be planted along rivers? So it's kind of like, what's the right practice?
Okay, so Miss Brohart, so we'll answer your question first. Okay, so there's a lot of different definitions that go into this work when we think about invasive versus native. So a native seed is technically a plant that's been there without human influence since glaciation or for a very long time, right? The plants that we don't want to put on the landscape are what are known as invasive species. And what an invasive species does is it spreads so prolifically, it spreads so much that it takes over the habitat that the native plants would be able to grow along. So wherever you are, you want to make sure you look up what the invasive species are. And what you want to be planting are what's known as ecotypes. Okay, so the Ecotype Project is the project I'm currently leading in the northeast of the US. And an ecotype is just a fancy word for the genetics of place. So those wild seeds, when I go walk out in the woods in Connecticut in an area that hasn't been disturbed, those wild plants that have been there, that have been adapted, just like we have our heirlooms that we like to eat out of our garden, our pollinators and our animals, they have their heirlooms. And that's what they've been eating and replanting in the wild places. So what I do is I work with botanists who have permission to collect those seeds, because we don't just want everyone going out to the woods and collecting these seeds, because you have to have permission. Make sure you're collecting the right seeds, know what you're collecting. And what we do is we take those ecotypes, or those truly wild local seeds. I work with organic farmers who plant those seeds and grow out those plants for the seed, right? So a plant's full life cycle, when we eat its fruit, like a tomato, or when you eat lettuce, you can actually let a plant keep growing and growing, and then its seeds come out, right? So I let the plant go to full maturity. I collect its seeds. Then we replant those seeds, and those are the plants that we take with us and put back onto the wild landscape. So the fancy word, if you're looking for a nursery wherever you are, you want to see if they have ecotypes, or you can email me and I can help you find someone. And also, you're just looking for truly local native plants, right? A provenance is a fancy word. Like, we want to know who painted this painting, right? Where did it come from? If you are working with a nursery and you can ask them, hey, do you know where these seeds are collected? The best you can do is to find plants grown from seeds that were collected near where you are, because those are the plants that are eco-regionally or bioregionally adapted for your living seed bank, for your soil. So that's the best that you can do. And then you just have to get permission from someone, like a land trust that has land along any sort of a river or a water course in your area, and see if you can't put in a pollinator garden for them. And then get some life jackets and get a group of citizen scientists together, and you all can be on a botanical expedition of your own. So yeah, truly local native plants.
I think we need to join you on a botanical expedition, Sefra.
Well, this year we're going to Maine and we're harvesting wild rice. So it's not a true rice, but it's a high protein grain, and you knock it into your canoe and you fill up your canoe with all the rice, and then you parch it or you dry it out over a fire, and then you dig a pit and you put a piece of canvas in it, and you put on your rice dancing shoes or your moccasins, and then you dance around in it to all the chaff come off of that seed. You winnow the seed and then you eat it, and it's the most high protein, delicious wild food. So a lot of the work I do helps to promote wild food, ancestral foodways, honoring the indigenous cultures that have caretaken these lands, like the Golden Hill tribe where I'm from. They called this land Machamucks because for 6 miles in, this used to just be huge nut trees and deer roaming and the oysters, and the way that these lands were caretaken was produced a lot of delicious food.
All right. I like this question. This is a really good question here. There's so many different varieties of seed, vegetables, and fruit. Why do you think we don't see more colorful foods and more varieties in our grocery stores?
A lot of that is supply and demand, right? It's all a matter of what the consumer, what the buyer wants and is asking for. Pomegranates, 10 years ago, they weren't very popular. And now through people liking them and buying them more, right now we see pomegranate juice. We see pomegranates a lot more in our supermarkets. And it's funny because even in the big supermarkets, if you go over and kind of look, you'll see fruits that you may not recognize. And then I encourage you, you want to make sure that no one has any allergies to any types of foods or anything, but try those different foods that you've never seen before. And also, if there's a local farmer's market, a lot of times organic farmers are buying their seeds out of these beautiful local seed catalogs. Now, for me, like when I look in a seed catalog, you're just looking at purple cauliflower and all of these amazing varieties. I'm sure cauliflower is a favorite vegetable of all of you kids out there. But if you actually look at a seed catalog from, High Mowing Organic Seeds or all of these beautiful Fruition Seed Company or Fedco, you'll see, or Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds, they have it's called rareseeds.org. If you go look on their website, you will see things that you never knew existed. And basically, the more that we talk to our local farmers and the more that we buy those from our supermarkets, the more that those farmers get supported to want to grow more of these weird or lesser known crops. But I can tell you, The taste is phenomenal. And I think you'll all be amazed to try something that you've never tried before.
Yeah, I think we become too used to the way we think things should look, and we become too used to seeing everything kind of perfectly round and colored and such. And a lot of food is wasted that way. It doesn't make it out of the fields or into the supermarkets because, people won't like the way that they look, or they're misshapen in some way, when in reality, they're perfectly good for us and perfectly
right. And that's a lot what happened with heirloom tomatoes, right? We used to only buy those round red tomatoes that we see. But as farmers said, hey, try this kind of bumpy, gnarly looking one, and you cut into it and it's so juicy and beautiful. It's that same sort of thing. The outward appearance into taste profiles, they're two completely separate things. So as we say, don't judge a book by its cover. Be adventurous, seed explorers.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're gonna put a couple more questions in. I want to hold a little bit longer too. Ms. Robinson's class, they just got called out on a fire drill, and I know they had one more question. So I want to make sure that when they get back in from their fire drill, that we can get that question in there. And then, who would you recommend in your community to contact to start learning a little bit more about seeds? Your local conservation area, maybe your local university. What would you do, Sefra?
Well, depending on where you are, I started something called the Seed Library at my local library. And a lot of places all around the country now have them. And what they are is, at your library, there's a free resource where you can go and check out seeds like you would a book. And you're able to take those seeds and plant them in your garden with the hope that one day you return those seeds back, right? So that you have seeds that are actually adapted to the places where you're living. So I would say first, check if you have a local seed library and go talk to who is ever running that at your public library. They're a really great resource, and there's a lot of really fun books. I would also check and see, is there a local farm near you? Because local farmers are amazing resources, and seeds are something that farmers are very, very familiar with. So check with your farmers. And, beyond that, there's also a lot of great resources online. I learned a lot of what I know from my great mentor, Bill McDormand, who runs something called Seed School online, right? Where he runs an online training program that takes you from knowing nothing about seeds to being able to run your own seed company.
Wow.
And so and my friend Petra at Fruition Seeds, she has so many YouTubes that also talk about how to caretake different seeds, or even seed catalogs from those different companies I said. They're really great references. There's so much information in them. So when you order seeds from hopefully organic local seed companies, when you get those seed catalogs, those are a great resource. And so are the people that you call on the phone and order your seeds from. So I think those are some really great places to start.
All right. And then another question here in the chat. This is from our North Carolina crew. Are you focused kind of on seeds for edibles right now, or do you work with any tree species?
Sorry, will you repeat the question? Seed for edibles? Is that what you said?
Yeah. So they're wondering if you're just working with seeds for edibles right now, or are you working with any tree species?
Well, it's a great question, because when we think about edibility, we have to think about for the humans or for the pollinators, and where do those things cross over, right? So right now, I'm running a native seed initiative, which is making sure that the pollinators have the edibles, have the food that they need, right? So I work with the Joe Pieweed and New York ironweeds and yarrows and black-eyed Susans and milkweeds, right? Because that provides our monarchs and all of these animals with the food they need. And we put those on our farms, because when those pollinators are present on farm, then they go over and pollinate our blueberries and our tomatoes and make sure that we have the plants that we need. Now, in that effort, we definitely do want to support perennial crops, right? So a lot of our perennial crops are our nut trees, right? The acorns, as we talked about, or the chestnuts, which we used to have 1 in 4 species in the Northeast temperate forest where I live, used to be chestnuts, but they all got wiped out again by a blight. So we do help to support some folks that that work with nut trees and even work with berry bushes, right? Because berries are perennials or fruit trees. And I'm a really big fan of perennial agriculture. And what a perennial is you plant it once and then it keeps on growing and living forever, right? Forever until it decomposes or falls down or reseeds, of course. But a lot of our vegetable crops, like our tomatoes and cucumbers and things, we have to plant each year because they're not native to our environment. So they die off in the winter. But when we plant nut trees and fruit trees and the stone crops, they keep growing. And that's a really great way to mimic natural ecosystems, make edible forest gardens, right? Make perennial polycultures. A polyculture is when you have a whole bunch of different species versus our monoculture. And just to round that out, once we put in the effort to put back in these perennials, they become regenerative. That's where we get regenerative agriculture, self-maintaining, self-perpetuating, self-regulating. These systems are closed loop systems that take care of themselves, which is really, as caretakers and stewards, the best thing we can be giving back to the landscape is putting in things that once they're there, nature knows what to do with it, and we can help restore a different environment. So I love the question about trees. Oftentimes there's these old proverbs of plant something that you don't even get to harvest, that your children's children harvest, right? Let's think in a long-term time scale about planting these 400-year-old oak trees, right?
Yeah. Can you repeat the information about the seed classes you were referring to? There's a classroom that is interested in looking more into it.
Sure. That is called, from the Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance, that's called Seed School.
Cool.
So Seed School. And that's for all ages. I think if you want something, a great curriculum for teaching seed saving in the classroom is something called A Handful of Seeds. And that is a free downloadable PDF that comes out of the Occidental Arts and Ecology. That's oaec.org, A Handful of Seeds. That's a really, really great curriculum that gets seed saving into the classroom. So I would start there. I think Seed School ends, when you kind of want to make a bit of a career out of it, but certainly they have a lot of great resources there. But yeah, those are good places to start. Or the slow food movement, right? Alice Waters, what she did a long time ago, the Edible Schoolyard. Edible Schoolyard, if you look that up, has a lot of great resources for doing agriculture in schools.
Okay. Ms. Robinson's crew, we're going to give them a chance for a final question. They had a fire drill. They're back in action. Let's see if they have one more question for us.
We do. I was wondering if you ever had to deal with an invasive species.
Great question. What was your name?
Logan.
Nice to meet you, Logan. Yes, we have to deal with invasive species all the time. Great question. Oftentimes when a landscape has been disturbed, a lot of the plants that grow back, there's a statistic around where I'm from, like 60% of them are actually crops that originate from Asia, right? So when we want to be able to put back in the native species, we first have to remove a lot of the invasive species. And there's a lot of different strategies that go along with that, depending on the scale that you're talking about. But right now I'm replanting this pollinator garden in a local park, and I go through and I have to rip out the garlic mustard, and I have to take out, the mugwort and things. And the best strategy for invasive species removal is taking it out before it goes back to seed, right? Because if we let those invasive species then drop their seeds again, then that is just making it so our living seed bank, our seed soil profile is just full of those invasive seed species. So if you can pull out or mow down those invasive species before they reseed, that's a helpful strategy. And interesting that you all had a fire drill, because all different seeds, just like they're all dispersed in different ways, it takes different environments for seeds to grow. So actually out in California, there's a whole bunch of types of plants, seed species, that their seeds have to go through a fire, like a California poppy, to be able to grow. Mm-hmm. And in the Northeast in Connecticut, our seeds have to go through the freezing winter in the soil to be able to grow. So I can just tell you, seeds are endlessly interesting, and they have so much great fun nuance and knowledge that goes along with them.
All right, as we're about to wrap up for today, Sunniva, you and Hilda, you were so far north that trees and plants, for the most part, probably didn't play too much of a role in what you were seeing every day. What, if any, plant life, maybe lichens? What did you see up there during your time?
Well, yeah, you're right about that. We're up in the tundra, and so there are no trees that grow up there. Just little shrubs, flowering mosses, different lichens. And there are quite a few ground flowers actually up in Svalbard. And we often, from our little perch at Bumsaboo, would look out the window and see the reindeer frantically trying to scrape for any type of ground seed cover, because that's their food source. And if the rain comes and freezes that over, they just can't even access it. And it's stuff you can barely see. It's really interesting. But despite the fact that there were not a lot of trees or real bushes and things like that up in the Arctic, it's still, the landscape is absolutely spectacular, because you start to look at things on a more of a microscopic level. You don't look up at the we can look up at the aurora like we have in the background here, the photo, but you're always looking sort of on eye level and down. It's very interesting. And I love what you share, Sefra, about your love of seeds. I'm never going to look at things the same way now. I mean, it's fantastic. And just, you speak a lot about the diversity of everything and how important that is. And I think about how important, just since WINGS has supported the month of biodiversity, and that we're both, Hearts in the Ice and you are flag carriers, I think of how important it is to have diversity of idea and diversity of thought and representation around the world too, and how much we learn from different cultures and different people. So I just really want to say thanks so much for sharing what you did with everybody today. It was really interesting.
It's a pleasure. And it's such a good point that diversity does not just look like forests. The desert has such great diversity wherever you are. It doesn't matter if you're in the forest or in a meadow, in a dry area, just look around and have fun with the plant life around you. And I wish all the classrooms the best of luck, and send some pictures of seeds that you find. I'd love to see them.
All right, very cool. Well, a huge shout out to our classrooms joining us today. I've added the website down there for heartsintheice.com to spend a little time exploring the work of Hilda and Sunniva, what they've been up to the past few years, what's coming up in the future, and then, of course, some great citizen science ideas. The ultimate citizen scientists, Hilda and Sunniva, who we've been lucky enough to hang out with since 2019. Amazing.
And Sefra, you're a citizen scientist.
Absolutely, no question.
We all are.
Yeah, we all are.
Well, thanks, Joan. Thanks, Hearts in the Ice. What fun.
All right. Have a great rest of the week, everybody. And hopefully we see you for some ocean action next week. But for now, we're signing off.
All right. See you later.
Oh.
Bye.
Bye.